welcome to the next lesson, comedy acting. Now previously we covered a couple of techniques you could use in your comedy auditions. In this lesson, you're going to hear directly from some working comedy actors who will have some great tips and techniques to share with you. I'm really excited to be chatting today with actor Charley Koontz. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming by. Tell us a little bit about your background, some of the work you've done.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that would be known, I think, is CSI Cyber just being part of that gigantic franchise. Mm-hmm. And then I did 5 out of 6 years, I think, on NBC's Community, which was a blast. So, you know, a really big mainstream thing and then a really small fan-obsessed thing, which, you know, is bizarre. has different life, but yeah, those are probably the biggest things.
I'm really excited to have actor Parvesh Cheena with us today. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Hi, friend. How are you?
I'm very, very good. So tell us what we would know you from.
I guess for the kids today, my big hit that broke me was Outsourced, 2010, for television, but we're Chicagoans, and Barbershop, the first movies, 1 and 2, we're casting that when we're in Chicago.
Babies. Yes.
Yeah. And we lived there.
Yeah.
So in addition to like those big ones, like I just did my first Big Bang Theory, which is like, all right, residuals forever.
Yes, right.
Seriously, let's take those. I'm like, finally, Kunal, thank you for being us in. Big Bang Theory, Fresh Off the Boat, and I've also been doing a lot of cartoons. So that's been really fun. Like my big break cartoon-wise was a Transformers cartoon called Rescue Bots, which is aimed toward like 3 to 7-year-olds, but it is currently the longest running Transformer cartoon ever. More than the ones like in the 80s that we watched when we were kids.
Yeah.
And yeah, those, I feel like those are the big ones right now.
Now, what made you want to be an actor? Like, one of the things I have talked about is the why. What motivated you to sort of pursue this particular journey? Like, did you know, were you naturally inclined? Is it something that someone told you, hey, you're really funny, or you're really...
Yeah, it was close to that. I mean, I think what a lot of people fall into, what I definitely fell into is falling in love with the work of it. So I think it started as an extracurricular thing in school, in high school, and also later into college. It sort of feels like an extra thing that you do, and if it comes naturally to you, it's kind of fun.
Right.
And what I really found in college especially was that I enjoyed the endless tech rehearsals and being in a theater for, 12 hours or whatever, just around the clock. Yeah, exactly. And, we were having a good time and partying in college and things like that, but what we were doing was, bringing a bottle of wine into or 8, into the theater and dissecting a play.
Right.
And that was the kind of conversations that we were having. That was the kind of debates that we were having. How should you do this? How should you do that? So I think it started as, I think, an affinity to doing it, and then really falling in love with the actual work of doing it, which I still love.
Would you say you had a why to becoming an actor? Was there something?
It was as simple as, I think a lot of artists kind of still start from like a sense of ego. It is about you at the beginning. I liked being clapped at. I liked being a class clown and people laughing. I liked also then discovering within plays, which is not always the best for a writer, but that ad-lib, because that's what it was called first, ad-lib, before you heard about improvisation and improvising. But just ad-libbing, tossing in this or a reaction, got even a bigger reaction than what was scripted, I thought was fascinating. Not that the performer would be better than the writer, but that it could enhance it.
Right.
So that was like that first, like in middle school, that first hint of, oh, you can also develop and write on the spot, which is our improv and comedy and sketch. But the why developed, I think, with college to like, oh, it's not just in service of my ego and my feeling good, which is also valid. I think people are. And if you have the benefit or the ability to do something that you love and feel good about yourself while doing it, we all need people to be like in the military, or we need people to be like engineers. I hope they love it,
Right.
and it makes them feel good. Maybe it does. I really hope it does.
You do a better job, I think, if you were really loving what you do.
Even as much as like I could say like as an upper middle class actor, like I really hope that grocery bagger loves their job too. But I really truly hope so. You know, that they're not just doing it because they need to. And if so, because I do joke now, like the older I've gotten, like, oh no, now I feel like the only thing I can do is acting, so I better like it.
You better like it.
Because if I don't like it, if you never, I really do, if you wake up every morning and you're like, you know what, I'd rather be a veterinarian, go be a vet.
Right.
Get into vet school right away, because if you don't love what we do, the amount of rejection and pain is too great if you can't balance the actual love of doing it when you can. So that why it was always like tenuous for a bit, because I always thought like I was an egotistical person, like I just wanted to feel good. But it really helped when I finally grasped like telling people's stories. My stories included, that's valid, not just like I don't need to just tell Tennessee Williams or Chekhov stories. It could also be like that Indian American college kid who wrote a play, let alone film, TV, or let alone actor, writer, where everything is becoming one. The performer, the entertainer, is now responsible for writing it, editing it, lighting it.
Producing it.
Yes.
Right.
Because if you don't, who will?
Right. Now, so you did you study it in school? Like, was it strictly extracurricular, or did you go to school to be?
I changed my major.
Okay.
It was extracurricular in high school, and then I went to film school at Loyola Marymount University for 2 years, because I didn't have the confidence I thought, or I just didn't really consider being an actual actor, but I loved movies and I loved TV, so I thought I can, maybe be a part of it in that way. So I went to film school. And then I saw, I think it was my sophomore year in college, I found a stack of flyers for the student-run theater, for The Marriage of Bet and Boo, which is a Christopher Durang play. And it said on the flyer, open to all majors.
Yes.
And I went and did it, and it was amazing, and it was that first taste of being in a theater with that many people who really care about it. And I called my parents, and I was supposed to study abroad for film like the next semester.
Right.
And I called and I was like, I don't think I can go do that. I have to be here and change my major to theater. And they were like, great. Wonderful.
Right.
So it wasn't even a delusion I had as a kid. It was a delusion I found.
Right.
Which is, worse.
But good. How fortuitous, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how did you get started in acting? Were you a person who always knew you wanted to be an actor, and therefore you kind of went with that trajectory, or like many of the people who I've been blessed to talk to, had some other aspiration for whatever reason, and then found yourself?
No, I'm one of those, like I always knew. Like, I'm from Chicago suburbs, from Naperville and Aurora, which are Wayne's World, outside of the city.
Right.
And third grade, around like third, fourth, fifth grade, when we started doing plays, I think in third grade, Georgetown Elementary School, I played King George III. And my nanny, my grandma, made me a red cape. And I thought, now I love the irony of an Indian American kid playing King George III. That was it. That first bite, second bite, like in sixth grade when we started doing musicals. And then by ninth grade, freshman year, it was like, oh, this is a profession of like big musicals, like Cheese Car Superstar to like Tennessee Williams plays. And I got like, Illinois does like an all-state high school theater festival, like the Thespian Fest, and they do shows that they'll do a big giant show that they'll cast people and crew people from across the state. So junior year I did Man La Mancha, and that was kind of like, okay, I can make this a career.
Let's take a little turn. Let's talk a little bit about Community. Talk about sort of Community is a comedy. What it was a
Community is a single camera sitcom about a group of ne'er-do-wells that end up at this community college, and just they form this study group. I always kind of thought that it was an early iteration of kind of It's Always Sunny.
Okay.
Where it was another send-up kind of thing where it kind of spoofed a lot of tropes in comedy and in pop culture, but especially sitcoms.
Right.
So it's a little bit of Seinfeld, it's a little bit of Always Sunny, where your core group of characters are not really good people.
Right.
You know, and it had so much heart.
Right.
Like, it really doubled down on that. So it took a long journey to get to the moral of the story and the resolution or whatever, but it had really emotional episodes. And so yeah, it was on NBC, and I started that in 2010. I graduated school in 2009, and then I started that in 2010.
Do you consider yourself a comedy actor?
No, I don't think anybody does. I mean, I think especially early on, you are not in charge of making that decision. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think you can have proclivities and you can have talents that maybe people will see, and certainly able to pursue independently, but I don't think anybody goes for just comedy or just drama. I think actors like to act.
Right.
But I love doing comedy.
Right. What are some of the, I don't know, tips or techniques or things you use when you're sort of breaking down a comedy script, or something you might do differently comedy-wise than you would, say, approached with a more dramatic piece, or you find that there isn't a lot of difference?
I think the difference between comedy and drama are few, but I think the differences are big. Mm-hmm. I heard the other day that Greta Gerwig had a really, really amazing thought, that she's interested in all the ways that people use language to not say what they mean. Mm-hmm. And I think that has a lot to do in drama, where there are emotions that rage kind of inside you, mm-hmm. and can certainly come out in these big, boisterous, Stella moments, but it's all about like a slow simmering, how am I coping with this situation? With comedy, everything is sincere. You double down on the sincerity. Everything hurts. Mm-hmm. You feel everything at its most powerful point, and then you contextualize it. Right. You know, the smallest slight can set off the biggest story, and that is always what comedy is to me, is sincerity and scope.
Mm-hmm. So comedy.
Yeah.
You are really well known for your comedy.
Yeah, I think like for a character actor, it's the in. Mm-hmm. And here in LA, especially like between 2004 and 2008, and it's shifted now. Like now we have a lot of like we talked about like the followers, social
right.
media. Yeah. What content creation have you done? Meaning like, have you done a web series or your own short film? But when we were doing it, it was like, were you funny? Mm-hmm. Meaning, did you go to UCB, Upright Citizens Brigade, Second City LA, Groundlings, IO, Improv Olympic West, which is gone mm-hmm. from LA, it's still in Chicago, but there are other smaller ones. Back then, you just had to go take like a basic class, an intro class, and then your agent would put it on your resume, and then you'd get to be called into commercial auditions, because commercial auditions wanted the funny people.
Right.
You know, we're too young to do the Cialis and Viagra commercials, so like commercials generally tend to be on the comedic side.
Yes.
And they just wanted to know that you could improvise, you could take a direction, you could change it up, and you could add your own to it. So that was that push, because I was kind of we were kind of theater snobs. Mm-hmm. Like we were like, we do theater, not improv, because we don't mind other people writing our scripts.
right.
So it all was here. It was the impetus. Funny being a Chicago, because everyone assumes I did Second City and IO in Chicago, and I didn't. I did some. You know, you do workshops, you do those intro, and then we'd have a lot of Second City directors teach at Roosevelt, but it was all here, and it did open up your door especially for commercial work, and any community, any sub-community, like the comedy community here. Work begets work. Mm-hmm. You know, a funny person then you'll see the same people in a lot of same things. They'll be kind of camps. I remember for a while it was like a lot of like the Apatow crowd, or like the Will Ferrell crowd, or the Adam Sandler group, you know. And then like within the Adam Sandler group, you'd have like the David Spades and Rob Schneiders.
Right.
Apatow, we have all like the, you know, Seth Rogans to the Francos. Like so, everyone had those groups, the Christopher Guest groups, you know, with Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy. So it was like these kind of roving, like there's kind of like a UCB group, like with like Nick Kroll and Mulaney and. So that was interesting, like to see like the big kind of camps, and they always work together. Also being ethnic, being Indian, like we were getting a lot more inroad. Like any group, you have the funny guys and you have the dramatic, pretty people.
Right.
So like we're like Sendil Ramamurthy and heroes, and he's hot, and then you have the rest of us guys like Pootie, Ravi Patel, Aziz Ansari, like a lot of. Just like doing comedy, like a lot of us were on NBC shows too,
Right.
and now you see kids in their 20s like Karan Soni from like the Deadpool movies, and Nick Dodani who's on Murphy Brown and Atypical, and it's kind of awesome. Like I don't think those kids will ever have to do so much. Karan naturally has a little bit of an accent. He's Indian raised, Indian born and raised, but like the kids now don't you feel that way about like kids in their 20s? They'll never have to be like, what are you? You're Brazilian?
Oh,
really?
right,
I don't get it.
Right.
You know, like
yeah, it's a totally different.
It's a different world now.
vibe. Yeah.
Which is great.
Do you have some specific acting techniques that you use?
I think comedy is much more writing. So I think once you know the tricks or the techniques of writing comedy, I think it makes it easier to perform in the sense of once you know that if you're going to go in for a sitcom, the general idea is 3 jokes to a page.
Got it, right.
So if you know that you're going in looking for 3 jokes to a page, you can see the jokes. You can find them. What I always thought was kind of interesting about doing Community was that I was not the star of the show. So I was the setup man. So I did 5 seasons on that show without a single punchline. I would just like lob it up,
right.
and then Joel McHale would spike it down, and I would be like, must be nice. So yeah, I think, but you know, when you start to see him as setups and punchlines and within the framework of scenes, it helps to sort of decode that mystery. I think a lot of people worry about, well, I'm just not funny.
Right.
Well, it's like,
I often say that. I'm like, I'm not a funny person, but it's
well,
not.
Well, it's not
really.
up to you.
Right, right.
You know what I mean? It's like, that was the best thing about Community, honestly, was, and I say this all the time, only because it's true, is that it was such good writing. And if the general idea is 3 jokes to a page, they would have 10. And it was so dense, and honestly, so hard to do.
Right.
It was so incredibly difficult to do, and I think that's another thing that people don't normally recognize about comedy, is that it's not that fun.
Right.
You know, all the pieces have to come together for when you see it to be funny.
Exactly.
But it takes forever, and you really sit and obsess about the moment, about the line, and you do the line 10,000 different ways, and it's only funny 2,000 different ways.
Right.
You know, so those things are there to be mined, but especially with something like Community, where we did so many like pop culture spin-offs and spoofs and whatever, we had to learn a new genre every week. We did westerns and gangster movies and fantasy movies with the D&D episode that I did. But it's serious business.
Did you find that there are certain skills you utilize as a comedy actor that would be different when you're doing a dramatic piece?
Sure.
And what are those things? Like what could you, for our students here?
The big one I think is where you utilize improvisation between drama and comedy, and there's also a big part of reading a room. Reading a room being like, let alone knowing like the writer of that episode or the director, but also just the culture of it. If you're booked on like a Curb Your Enthusiasm where they expect you to improvise within a limit, you know, you're not just gonna be willy-nilly just doing your own like set, or like, you know, you're not gonna be like Ace Ventura talking out of your butt.
Right.
as Jim Carrey would. You know, no, you have to be within the parameters of what the writer's given you. There's a little bit more leeway in comedy. I feel like, and also improvise. If you're just a co-star, maybe with 1 or 2 lines, maybe now it's not your time to go on your improv rant rave bit. But if you're a series regular, you're part of the show. Let alone it's maybe even the end of the scripted scene, the button. You know, like after like they've given you all the dialogue, sometimes the director, the writers, cast wants to play and keep going. That's a great moment where you can add stuff to it. You're just looking for like a nice ending, a nice moment. Comedy, it's much easier. With drama, improv is not needed. Not always. You know, like if you can bring it within the behavior, and I always like, when I work, a character actor like me, when I work in an hour long, I know that I'm kind of like the comedic guy, like the comedic maybe tech guy, not the person who's like holding the gun or like needs to cry because their baby was kidnapped.
Right.
So there's less needed. Comedy, it just lends itself to it because there's also that vibe of best joke wins. There's not a little less ego from the writer and producer and director of like, well, that's not my words. Well, you were getting credit, so take it.
Right.
You know, you're the one credit for it. Let's just see best joke wins. I like that moment. I always have joked like if the script are numbers, and if within my scene that you and I are doing, we are doing 3, 4, and 5, but then we get to fill in like 3.1, 4.8, and then 5.6. And so like 3, 4, 5 is what the scene that you and I have to do. And then they keep rolling. That's at 5.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where we're just adding and be like, and by the way, lovely dress. Thank you, I made it myself. You know, and that's maybe where they take that cut or edit.
Right.
It's just fun. That's that element of play. When we were doing drama, serious, scripted stuff where stakes are so high, it needs to be crafted a bit more. I feel I respect the writer that much that it's a different story. And what I think comedy training, even from improv, especially improv, and I'm not talking about like stand-up, a different skill set. I'm not talking about even just when you have to sit and write. But improv, all you are is listening. And so even if you can put that into any acting, I'm just like always hyper listening whenever I act. And you see some people who kind of can like tune out like, oh, you've got your monologue.
Right.
I'm listening because like, what if you go off? Or what if you do something different? So that was the biggest lesson that improv can give anyone.
You know, one of the classes that I did earlier, I talked a lot about, I tend to do a lot more drama. But just like you said, I started in comedy in Chicago, and for whatever reason got out here and everyone's like, oh, she's the girl who can cry on cue. Oh, she's
pretty.
the girl. Yeah, thank you.
That's how it works. Yeah. Goofs like me and, you know. Can you play a big dumb idiot?
Right.
Yeah, sure. Whatever you want.
So, do you find that, you know, I do a lot of drama, and in doing drama, I often have to research a number of things, especially like, let's say I'm doing a period piece. So I really look into the hair, I look into what people wear, people carry themselves differently. In comedy, do you find there's a lot of research needed? I mean, obviously, if it was set in a period, I'm wondering it probably.
Yeah, I mean that would be all the work for sure.
Right.
I think that comedy is, again, if sincerity is king, I think comedy, the research that you do and the prep work that you do is intensely inward. You know what I mean? I think it's being vulnerable. And working on that vulnerability.
Right.
So, I mean, if there are factual things that you have to look up, I think obviously
Goes without saying.
you got to be there. But comedy is very selfish. You know what I mean? I think it's how this affects me.
Got it.
And which is great. And so it is, you dig deep into what your weirdnesses are, what your oddities are, and then you just pull them out and go, well, here's a weird thing I think about this. Probably not super popular, but have you guys ever, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's what I would say. And again, comedy is writing.
So I'm guessing you're suggesting that actors should probably take an improv class.
I think it's just easy, especially the give and take element. And a lot of us actors are takers. We'll take. We have a free moment, how sometimes I feel like it's on me.
You're giving me the mic?
No, so like I feel like sometimes like when there's like a dull in a conversation at a dinner table, like a dinner of 6 or 8, I feel like I should say something entertaining.
Right.
You know, like I feel that, and I don't. Maybe I'm totally wrong and stupid to feel that. You know, why we get those actors, you know, kind of reputations. But I do sometimes feel like I should fill this moment.
Is there any other advice you could offer to actors who are wanting to get into comedy?
Yeah. The first thing for anyone wanting to get in comedy is you have to see shows. I don't think there's a world where you just do anything on your own. Go out, see stuff, any town you're in. I mean, like every city, small towns have like a local improv, sketch, let alone community theater presence. I used to do shows at the Summer Place, which was Naperville. I think it's like they're in their 40s, if not 30 years worth of stuff. Even your local community theater, do an improv troupe. I mean, it's not that difficult to like do some basic improv comedy games. There are books galore. You can get it online. That would be a very fun start because you could do it at a coffee shop. You know, like high school
Your
kids
basement,
even.
yeah.
Seriously, you could just do it anywhere. 20 minutes, 10 minutes, do some games. Yeah, that's the biggest one. Like, you have to go see stuff, and if there's nothing to see, start it yourself. And then with dramatic stuff, I would just say, like, I do think that there's so much, like, I forget, like, as cities, I feel like Portland to Minneapolis, Chicago, everything feels the same. Like, everyone has, like, the same groups of friends, and there's, like, the alternative comedy scene, there's, like, the regular stand-ups, like the Zanies. And I think there's so much to be had. You don't just have to be in New York, Chicago, and LA. It helps. They're great places. And then even without the improv comedy sketch scene, I still say theater. There's always, we all got our start in plays. It's not like we were like elementary school.
Like,
we weren't doing like Annie.
Stand up, right?
Yeah, we were doing Annie. We weren't, or King and I, we weren't doing, I'm doing a lot of offbeat improv. You're 8. The theater, like I know like it's a different world with like a lot of people doing their own like YouTube channels and own short films, which is awesome. Keep it up. But I also do urge people to, there's nothing, and you'll never be humbled or taught more than a live audience. Because live audiences, even if it's an audience full of your mom's friends, will
They're gonna be honest.
They're gonna be very honest. You'll get that ha ha polite laughter versus the uproaring guffaw or or like all of that will fashion how you deliver your timing. You're not gonna barrel through stuff when you see people are reacting at every minute. Oh, I must be doing something.
What advice could you give to someone who is wanting to pursue acting, who is maybe starting off acting?
I think the advice is to love it, to have it be the only thing that you can do. You can't not do something else.
Right.
Because it's hard, but it's incredibly worth it. I think you have to know why you're doing it. Spoiler alert, it's not the recognition.
That's not enough.
It's not anything. It comes and goes.
Right.
I mean, you know, and that's something that you kind of hope that people hear. But that is the weird part. And it's a separate part of your job.
Right.
But the work is fun. The other piece of advice, if you've come to that point where this is what you need to do, and it's what I need to do, I completely support it. I think there's no better way to live. But the other thing is, what I get asked a lot is like, how do I make it happen? Like, you can't make it happen.
Right. Fairy dust.
It just
Tinkerbell
happens.
comes and goes. Ding.
But a lot of people ask. I go back to Loyola Marymount University every year, and I talk to like the graduating seniors, and they're about to of the theater department, and they're about to get out into the world. And the questions, I've done it for about 6 or 7 years. The question always stays the same. My answers have changed as I've worked, and I was insufferable at the beginning when I was feeling very fancy. But the question most often asked is, well, how do I what do I do to make money while I try to do this? What kind of job should I get? And the answer is anything.
Right.
Anything. Anything. Walk dogs.
Right.
Hang Christmas. I knew a guy who hung Christmas lights. He made all of his money for the year in 2 weeks.
Nice.
In December.
Oh yeah, because that is actually a
Totally.
pretty good gig.
For
especially if you're on
gigantic neighborhoods.
Right, right.
For rich people
Yeah,
who are willing to pay
do
for that.
it.
Who don't own a ladder for some reason.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your wisdom.
It's
We
nothing.
appreciate having you here.
Thank you.
And looking
It's,
forward.
it's talking with old friends. too.
Yes. Looking forward to our next one. Thanks. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It's a fickle mistress, this biz.
It is, but we love it.
But she's cute.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for our next great lesson.